Good afternoon. I'm standing here with Jeff Payne, CEO of OpenCar. Jeff, thank you so much for joining.
Absolutely.
Jeff, tell us a little bit about OpenCar.
Well, let's see. We are an application development environment for third-party application developers as well as automakers and tier ones. There are three components in the overall product proposition. There is the framework that actually runs on the head unit in the car. There's a software development kit that is not really just a byproduct of the framework, but is a product. It's productized to meet the specialized requirements of software developers, whether in-house or third-party. And there's a third piece called Inside Track that ties it all together, basically providing the continuity, the workflow for developers.
Perfect. So tell us a little bit more about the Inside Track, and I of course want to get into the other parts as well.
So Inside Track is a hosted service from OpenCar. It's a portal, and the goal is to provide end-to-end SDLC management for either a project, and that is a development of an application or a feature for an infotainment head unit, or for a program, right? So that would be the packaging of those features or applications by automakers or tier ones. And so this provides not only the SDLC management, but really the sort of a well-orchestrated workflow so that when applications are coded following the rules of the framework, what you end up with is a nicely organized system that allows you to confidently move from one hardware platform to the next, one operating system, one operating platform to the next. You can actually, with high confidence, pull the entire runtime out and replace it. And the ramifications of this are automakers can not only get to market very quickly with reasonable confidence that what they see in their simulated environment is actually going to work on the target device. That's new in automotive. But they can confidently facelift their HMI, change out controls so that in year one perhaps it's a list, in year two perhaps it's a 3x3 or 4x3 icon list. And that's the way that lists are represented. Take some fairly radical steps to move the product forward without disturbing the application logic that's actually driving it.
Right. And I think to the obvious question, what we discussed, so there is a knee-jerk reaction today of every OEM signing up for CarPlay and Android Auto.
Yeah.
How do you think that's going to play against what you guys are trying to bring to the market?
Yeah.
How different do you think automakers should think about this?
Well, I think we're in phase one of the connected car. When we move into phase 2 and 3, things start getting interesting. Phase 1 is inevitably a big button representation of the smartphone, and Android Auto and CarPlay entered the market at just about the right time. It's inevitable and it's attractive. As a driver, I want that as well. But they're point applications. They're smartphone applications on the screen in front of me, and that doesn't necessarily, from the automaker's perspective, bring buyers back in droves. The automakers need to learn a lesson from the smartphone guys about the way that software is made in the New World Order, and they need to make sure that they're addressing that in the way that they're creating the basic software, that all of the software-defined systems and features of a car. And that's where we come in. One of the reasons that it's almost impossible for them to do this right now is automaker moves from one tier one to the next, and they end up with different development platforms. Software developers try to work with different tier ones and different automakers that have different HMI requirements, and everything becomes bespoke. And so there is no sort of natural flow and standards in organizing all of this. With that in place, I guess I equate what we do to being a building products supplier who, not architects, right? The architects have the imagination. The building product supplier there's not much appreciation for what they do. But if you don't have products that hold together, you can't use your imagination, and we're seeing this today. There is a level of organization that we can introduce just in the basic tooling that will allow automakers to each come up with completely unique user experiences, completely unique software-defined value propositions that really distinguish their brand, and then they can stand on that, defend that, bring them back to the showroom in 5 years because a particular brand buyer understands that brand's systems, and they have a feeling that that brand understands the way they want to interact with the car.
So essentially, to be very basic about this, you're talking about developing something that will last for 11 years.
Yeah.
Perfect. So how have the conversations with the different automakers and tier ones been?
It depends on the tier one and the automaker. Obviously, the high-end guys are a bit more experimental. The low-end guys are very, very cost-conscious and very, very conservative, and feeling uncomfortable that the world is pushing forward into a territory that they don't have the internal development, culture to accommodate. Automotive is a heavy manufacturing discipline. It's very waterfall. You create a mountain of specifications and then you simply execute them. The Wild West of software development is agile, where the specifications are continuously refined as you go through at least the first pieces of the development process, and you end up with bugs right before you ship, and then you debug it because it's software. You can do this. And then you ship, and you know that you're going to wake up the next day and you're going to start working on the next version of that. That's part of the culture of software development. But it's a very, very different thing to accommodate if you've been doing things a particular way for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years.
Try to break the conservative cycle.
Yeah. And so I think what we face is for an automaker to understand and appreciate our value proposition, we need to set context. We need to sit down and talk about what is the business problem and what is the reality of the requirements of post-SOP support. It's one thing to develop a system, ship it, and move on, and the team breaks apart, but that's the old model. There has to be some way of continuing to service this post-SOP. And when you start looking hard at that, you start thinking, I really need to have some standard best practices. I need to have standardization among the tools. And if I really want to take advantage of the universe of third-party software contributors, not just app developers like we see on smartphones, but a broad cross-section of invaluable software contributors, I should probably allow them to all code to some standards. So I'm looking at a library, not bespoke applications on contract, one at a time, moving very slowly and expensively.
Right. So final question then.
Yeah.
What do you see the next 2, 3, 5 years for the company?
Well, I think I like the position where we are right now. It's 2016. I think after doing connected services and applications for the last 25 years or so, and looking at the world around you and the way that the big established players react to these new social factors, I'm perfectly happy to wait another year or 2 or 3. I think we're seeing change at about the pace that we expected to see when we started the company in 2011. 2016, 2017, these are going to be fairly significant years for companies like ours. 2015 actually in many ways was as well. And so the transition is just starting to happen right now. It's just slow enough that you have to pay attention, but it's just fast enough that companies like us are scrambling to keep up.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pleasure.